welcome back to Design Deconstructed. This is episode 17, where we are going to be taking a look at the epilogue of End of Dragons, chapter 15, which is called The Cycle Reborn. It is a really fascinating chapter. There's not a lot of gameplay. There's just a lot of narrative design. There's not much to talk about from the standpoint of finding the fun or puzzles or combat mechanics. There's none of that, but there is plenty to talk about in terms of characters, how we develop really sort of complex dialogue systems, and the things that we do to make character development and dialogue really sort of stand out, because that's really what all of this is the epilogue. Is just lots of talking to different characters, finding out how to do that in the most constructive way possible, and the challenges that we had in terms of keeping those scoped appropriately, because the epilogue was from the very beginning something that we weren't sure we wanted to do. We had it as a nice to have, and over development we realized that we did have the time to do it, but then the question became, what kind of epilogue do we want to have? And then I went a bit crazy and added a second epilogue to the whole mix. So I'll talk about that and why we did that, and the decisions behind how that came to be, and the very special moment that happens at the end of that second epilogue. So yes, there's lots to talk about and not a lot that I need to set up. So let's go ahead and jump into the game, and we will take a look at Chapter 15, The Cycle Reborn, and I will see you shortly in game. Okay, we are here in Arborstone, and we're going to go ahead and replay The Cycle Reborn. So
we're all gathering at Arborstone, Commander.
We always, I think, had planned to do an epilogue for End of Dragons, because End of Dragons was the sort of finale of the Dragon Saga. We thought it would be appropriate to have something, but the scope of it was pretty undefined when I joined the studio, when I joined the project, because it was just Connor and myself who were tasked to build all of the story content for this expansion, and it was a sizable enough story that each of us grabbed half of the chapters, but the epilogue was sort of like it was sort of flagged from the beginning as a would be nice to have, there, and was sort of left open-ended as far as how big of an epilogue we wanted to do. Initially, we had talked about maybe having the epilogue take place across the entirety of Tyria, because it is wrapping up the entire dragon cycle. Maybe we had a thought that you might have to go to all the different sort of world capitals and brief them on the fact that the dragon cycle is over. And we had some sort of ambitious thoughts on that, but in the end we realized that for us to maintain the scope and not put ourselves into perilous a position, and of course there's downstream effects on other teams like QA and audio, we opted instead to just have a single wrap up a story instance, where we would bring in all of our players, or not players as in terms of like people who play the game, players in terms of players on the stage of our story. So we have everybody here who we interacted with throughout End of Dragons, and some that we didn't, like Captain Ellen Keel has shown up. So we just had everybody that was sort of relevant to our story. There's Crystal Bloom over here. There are commoners and peasants. There's Minsec. There is Snargle Goldclaw, if you have done the collection. He and Bonnie are over here. They have a neat little scene together. That's a little bit of an Easter egg. I'm not sure if anybody else has seen that yet. Because that's actually one of those where you probably would not see this on first time playthrough, because Snargle's collection is fairly robust, and so in order to complete that, you probably have to play through the entirety of the expansion once. So this is probably more of a replay bonus scene with Snargle. If you don't know who Snargle is, I definitely advise you to go look him up, because he's an awesome character, and everybody should know who Snargle is. Yeah, and there's Junlai Jade, Captain Fa. There's some Aether Blades. These are Aether Blades who are they were loyal to Trin. Sorry, I'm getting names all mixed up. I've put a few of them here to show that maybe there's a possibility that Ivan has recruited some of these people for the future. I mean, I don't know. We have no things that we're talking about yet. At least not publicly. I'm sure you can imagine we are working on the next thing, so I can't say anything more about that. But yeah, there's Kestrels, and there's if you did find the June's family in the mansion instance, they also show up here. So there's some little extra bonus things, and then we just come up here and we talk to Maureen and start off the ending scene.
Not just here, but everywhere.
Yes, the dragon cycle is ended.
So the void's gone then? For good?
Not quite. It wasn't lying when it said it was a constant.
Another note on this is, because we ended up putting everything into this one instance with all these different characters and all these different dialogues, this was initially supposed to be what we call a pocket instance, which is basically a pocket of content. They're supposed to be small, although Arborstone is fairly large. Pocket does not necessarily intend to mean like size of the map as much as it is how much content is in the map. But once we got in and started to talk about what we wanted to do and how much we needed to wrap up and talk about and have optional conversations with all these different characters, it grew from a pocket instance into a small, which is the next step up in terms of complexity. And
Before any of that,
but yeah, I mean, it wasn't. It was a kind of thing where normally when we have kind of what we call scope creep, which is when scope changes from from a level and jumps up. Those are things that our producing team are always wary of. They get nervous when we increase scope, because this has downstream effects on other teams. Not just can the designer implement it, but do the writers have time to write all the extra dialogues? Do we have time for audio to come in and make sure that they hit all the things that they need, all these little extra moments? In this case, there wasn't really a need or a call for additional audio, other than, as you see, we implemented credits back into the game. That was a thing in and of itself. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So an interesting thing that since about 2013, we have not had credits in the game. And we did put credits out, but I think they were on the website or in a blog or something out of the game. And in part because this object in Duo was particularly hard to work with. Well, I shouldn't say it's not hard to work with, it's quirky. In order to make this object, you have to do some kind of, I don't know, the generous thing to say would be kind of silly. Silly things that you have to do. So, for example, by default, it has like one column text. In order to get two columns, what you end up having to do is you have to put in a name and their title, leave a blank space, and then another name and the title, so that it will create a blank space and move text over. So I ended up having to do a lot of like blank spaces in between things, and then anytime like I had to add something, I would have to like rejigger everything. So it was a bit of a pain in the butt to work with, but I was dedicated to this. Like this was one of the things that I drove on this chapter, because I'm all about crediting people. That's a big thing I care a lot about. Everybody, I think, who works on a game should get not only the credit for their main job, but if they did other things, they should get that credit as well. We definitely took a stab at that this time around. You can see the credits are a fairly long list. If you look here, I have a credit in world design, and I have a credit in story design, and then later I have a credit down here for narrative as well, because I did some additional writing. So, you know, we really tried to make it important that we credit everybody who worked on the project. People who weren't necessarily on the team but helped out got credit in the special thanks sections. We had in memory of sections that we added this time. You know, just and we made sure everybody's title was added so that everybody knows, you know, what contributions they made and at what level. You know, it's important for us, I think, as an industry, and not just as a studio, but as an industry to do a better job at crediting people who work on a project. So I was super happy to be able to kind of push for this. I mean, I didn't have to push very hard. You know, it was basically me just sending an email to JT, who is one of the co-leads of the studio, and saying, hey, JT, I think we need to have credits back, and I want them in the game. And he was like, absolutely. You can tell me what you need. So, you know, and from there it was just working with our producer to make sure that we got all the names that we needed. You know, and it's wrangling a lot of different communications over email, like, you know, having to talk to Blind Light, which is our VO studio down in Burbank, about like how they want to be credited. The voice actors that we have, which are on screen right now, obviously have specific things that we wanted to call out, not only their name but their role, so that players know who's voicing who. Additional voices, of course, and this is the Blind Light credits. So, you know, it was a super important thing for us. We made sure that we did it. We even got our audio team and our awesome composer McLean and his team of other composers. They all got together and gave us a wonderful song, which I talked all over, so I apologize for that. Hopefully you all have heard it without my jibber jabber. And yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna go around and start talking to different NPCs. I had a lot of fun setting all these up.
Congratulations are in order.
It's a victory
And
for all of us.
You're right. All of us. Sorry.
I was trying to think if I wrote any of these. I don't think I actually ended up writing any of these dialogues.
Let us know if you ever need
Some of the
anything.
writing that I did was in earlier chapters, but
Thank you.
it's always cool to be able to like at least stub in, even though I didn't. Well, I don't know. I did write the first pass. That's one of the things about design. We tend to kind of stub in text. The dialogue goes in with our ideas of what we think these conversations are going to be, and then we turn that over to the writing team and the narrative lead, and everybody gets together and figures out what they actually want to say in these conversations. And so I got some of them right in terms of like what they would be talking about, but you know, the writers did end up writing all of these scenes on their own.
How about what you'd imagine, a circus?
So again, you can talk to all of these characters, and we have done the thing that I think I talked about last episode, where you can't sort of interrupt yourself. Once you start a dialogue, you have to listen to it. I know it's one of those things, like, I'm sure there are some players who really are not a fan of unskippable dialogue. I'm not in some cases either. Like, I do understand it's frustrating to have to sit and listen to dialogue when it's
There's policies and reforms I
not,
want to
or when
enact
it's part
that
of
hopefully
a thing. It's one, or it's one part of the golden path. That's one thing. But with these, where they're optional dialogues, we kind of assume that if you've clicked through to talk about these dialogues, that you're invested and you want to listen to them. So we do put them in a state where you can't interrupt dialogues. You can skip in between, so I can talk to Rama instead.
I think I need a break from the ministry for a while.
But then if I go talk to Min again, you don't have the option to talk to her until Rama is done talking. That way, you can't, you know, sort of spam dialogue and ruin your own experience.
Nice to go freelance.
So that's it, huh? You're gonna leave us mooks?
In
with
part,
gallivant
the
across
reason we also did it here is because, as you see, talking to Rama sometimes involves both characters kind of bantering back and forth. And so, if you were able to talk to Min here and start her dialogue, even if you didn't care that they were talking over each other, it would mess up
right?
the dialogue with Rama, because they would then start having lines,
Next time you're in town,
different
say hi.
dialogues where both
You know the secret.
are trying to get Min to speak, and it would not, in the game we get confused about which dialogue should be playing, and it would probably cancel one, and so you would get kind of weird half dialogues. So we didn't want to have to do that.
He'll be given a trial and sentenced accordingly, I guess. He was pretty docile in custody. Told us
This is
everything.
also kind of
Even gave
a
up the
thing
names
that
of some other prominent
I think
tourists. At the
we
end of
will
the
probably be
interrogation, you know
doing
what he said to me?
more of,
Please
is
send
having
someone to look
multiple
after Chobi.
conversational
That's his
things with characters,
You
just
like
because
that guy
we
because
get
he's got a soft spot for his
we get
pooch.
kind of a 2-for-1 out of scenarios like this, where you know, if you have to talk to both of them individually, you know, if he has, let's say, 20 lines and she has 20 lines, you know, that's 40 lines, where, like, maybe, you know, by talking to Rama and talking to Min, if she has 5 lines of that dialogue, then that's 5 lines of hers that we can kind of, like, we can cover more ground with multiple characters, I guess is what I'm saying. And so we don't necessarily have to have long individual conversations with anybody, because this, I mean, as you see with the, you know, the markers, there's a lot of people to talk to in this instance. It's mostly just dialogue, right? Like, there's the opening speech.
Who are all these people? They're weird.
I always have to talk to Akane because she is my favorite character in this expansion. I love her snark.
Kaz, Jory.
There was also some instances where
Be back.
Happy to have the whole apocalypse situation
sequence
handled.
matters. So in this case, as we see, Kasmir has a marker because you could talk to her, but you couldn't talk to Marjorie yet. Marjorie has nothing to say yet, because Marjorie's optional dialogue is actually predicated on you having spoken or listened in on Gorik and Timey's dialogue, because you actually ask Marjorie about something that you learn from Gorik and Timey. We initially had it where you could talk to her from the beginning, but we definitely thought it's a little bit weird that you bring up something that Gorik said when Gorik hasn't said it yet. So, you know, we called that out in feedback. I think Connor made that note, made sure that we had that so that all of this stuff is being tracked. And I mean, that's an interesting thing to talk about as well. So the way that we do sort of large scale optional scenarios like this is that each of these dialogues basically has a bit on it. So it's a simple on-off bit. And once you have that dialogue, it flips the bit and says you've heard this dialogue, right? So we are tracking how many of these dialogues you have heard, and we do that for a number of reasons. One is so that we can clear markers to show that you've progressed that, which is important because there is an achievement in this chapter for talking to everybody. And so we wanted to make sure that it was clear who you had and hadn't talked to. And that is checked at the start of the instance. And then the other thing that we do is when you have like multiple conversations like this, or multiple options to talk to Aureen about, because we're in an instance we can set bits, which we don't always have in the open world, or we don't always feel is worth spending those kinds of bits on.
Because I believed in you. All this time,
As you'll see,
I've
once
been
Aureen is
searching
done
for the
talking
purpose
in
of
this
the Elder
conversation,
Dragon.
when
I
the
think
window
I
pops
know
back up
now.
again, that option will not be there. So that way, now you only have 2 left. And so that's another way for us to be able to track, oh, I asked her that question already.
Not as different as I would have expected.
There's downsides to that too.
Something's changed
One
about
of
the
them
lay
is
energy.
obviously that
Somehow
once
it's
you have a
more
conversation and it sets that
pure.
bit, you can't
But
have that
make no
same
mistake,
conversation
my
again and again.
champion.
So if you do miss
As
it,
long as
the only way to
dragon
kind of
magic
learn
continues to
what she
exist,
said, what he or
so
she said,
too will
is
the
to check the
void.
chat log
They only
and read
destroy
it,
the form it took.
which is,
But
I don't know.
at least
I don't
it
think
won't
that's a
be in
terrible thing.
Interior anytime soon.
You know, sometimes we
That
will say
doesn't make
maybe
me
it's
feel much
okay for
better.
you to be able to replay it. But again, when there was an achievement involved and the
Now
achievement
that
was
I'm
to have all the
only
dialogues with all the
one,
characters,
I can
it made
see
more
the
sense
ley
for us
lines
to
in their
just
entirety.
make it so that it's like a checklist, and once you
If
check it
there's
off,
ever a ripple
you're
in
done.
the sea of magic,
So that way you can
I'll
see.
know. As will you, Scion and Champion.
I suppose one of the things we could have considered doing is after you have completed this achievement, maybe it just turns all the bits back on so that you can talk to everybody again if you want. I don't know, like it feels like such an edge case
Thank you,
that I'm not
champion.
sure it would be worth
I wish I'd had
pursuing
more time
something like
with
that.
her. I hope I can do right by her legacy.
All right. Anyway, Ellen Keel was an interesting add late. We initially did not have her show up here, but
First Alona, now Cantha.
we had
Stop leading
had
us, Commander.
sort of
I heard
2
you were
desires
outside
with
my train.
adding her.
That's good.
Theo Ashford's husband deserves some measure of justice.
One is that we knew we were in the very early stages at that point of talking about season 1 coming back, and so we kind of wanted to have a refresher on Ellen Keel because we knew she was going to be brought up again, and you know, maybe some players aren't sure. 2, we wanted to have a moment where she asks what your opinion is of whether Maitrin redeemed herself. Nothing really tracking here other than it's just a moment for the player to have a little bit of a choice of their weighing in. And if you say yes, she kind of disagrees with you. She says, you know, I don't know that I agree, but and if you say no, she you know. So anyway, it's again just a little moment of
Well,
character
I'll see eye to
development,
eye with you on
flavor
that. I
for the
respect your
commander.
opinion. Either way, I'm gonna write up my report and head back.
And
to my research.
I will give all the credit where credit is due. We also added this last one here where you can ask about Zalambur, which is the last
I
time
had my
we
pleasure.
saw her, and
Ilona was a good
she
friend.
talks about
I'm here in
wanting
Cantha
to
on official
maybe
business, but I wouldn't mind
get
sampling the
a little
local
bit more familiar with a certain
On an unrelated
detective
note, who's the gentleman
with a
in
big
the
hat.
big hat?
Yeah.
I'd
I
appreciate an
Quan
introduction.
Perng, our narrative lead, was responsible for giving her that personality type of maybe being a little bit on the prowl. I mean, you know, she's a pirate captain now, so yeah. I'm not going to talk to everybody because I could be here for a half an hour, and I do want to move on to the second of our epilogues, which is a cool moment. Oh yeah, I also I'm scattered. I put the cats here, Maitrin's cats, just because I thought that would be funny. So implying that Ivan has adopted her cats because, you know, he cared about Maitrin, and so, you know, he probably was at her apartment and saw all the cats and was like, "Aw, I'm not going to leave you guys to starve." And apparently he's got an airship now, so if we ever see Ivan again on his airship, I'm sure it's going to be loaded down with cats. And who doesn't like that?
And at one point, I climbed onto Rama's shoulders so I could jump off and kick a void beast right in the face.
It's one of the only sort of player trigger proximity lines in this. I was coming over here. Oh yes, I will do Snargles because I don't know how many people have seen this, and so I want to record it for posterity.
Commander, I believe congratulations are in order. You've saved the world yet again. Oh, me? I'm taking some time off before my next endeavor. Gold Claw and Kundera Publishing House will officially begin operation this year. There's a minor dispute over whose name comes first, but Barney will come to see the equity inherent in the Gold Claw name. None of this would have been possible without you. You have my utmost sincere gratitude. Until we cross paths again, my dear Commander.
Yes, Gold Claw and Kundera Publishing. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah. Again, I could talk to everybody, but again, that would just take up a lot of time. Anyway, before I got distracted by the cats, I was going to say, so initially, as I said at the start of this, there was an epilogue planned, but it was very scalable. We didn't have an idea of how big of a thing we wanted to do. Well, that also was true. What also was true is that there was only the one epilogue. But the more I got into implementation on this chapter, the more I began to realize that we were missing something, and we were missing something that I had been wanting in the game since the end of Heart of Thorns, which is the proposal between Marjorie and Kasmir. They've been a staple couple in our game for some time. And we had wanted to get them to be more official in their relationship, but for a variety of reasons, it never happened. And so when I got around to starting to work on this epilogue, I thought, you know what? This is one of those cases where I'm going to ask for forgiveness and not permission. And I just went ahead and built a second epilogue, knowing full well that I may have to just rip it out. That's why I built it as a second epilogue, because it would be very easy to have just ended this story here. And just, you talk to everybody, you go away, and, you're done. But I thought no harm, no foul. If it doesn't get accepted, if nobody else wants this in the End of Dragons expansion pack, it's very easy. It would be very easy for me to rip out, and it's super easy for me to set up. So I spent an afternoon when I had some free time outside of my normal work schedule. I ended up with being ahead of schedule on something else, and so I was like, oh, I've got an afternoon free. Let me take a stab at this. And so I threw it together, and I did it the week or two before chapter 15 was supposed to get reviewed by our stakeholders. And so I kind of put it in there without telling anybody, because I wanted it to be a bit of a surprise of like, hey, there's this cool thing. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to let you experience it, and you tell me whether I'm insane. And so that is how this instance, this next part of the chapter, came to be. And everybody, needless to say, everybody loved it. There was some trepidation about the scale of this as well, because once I put this in, there was definitely a sense from some people who saw it that, oh, this is too small. Like, why are we going to have just, these small number of individuals show up at the dead-end bar, and that's it, right? Like, we should absolutely grow this into something bigger. It has to be a bigger moment. And I fought that. I really did not think that it needed to be bigger than what is in the game currently. The only thing that we ended up sort of growing scope on was when my initial plan was I was just going to have them do the proposal as you see it. but not have any of the custom animation. Like I really didn't. I didn't want to have a lot of overhead on this. I just wanted it to be a very quiet, calm moment between the commander, their friends, well, their guild, really, right? Dragon's Watch. And there was some amount of sort of feedback that, no, this should have Kaith needs to be there, and what about Rama, and what about, like, and I was like, no, like, this is not that, right? Like, this is not the wedding. The wedding can be as big as we want it to be whenever we do that, right? Like, I have no idea what the plan is there. But this is just the proposal. And for me, like, the other thing I thought of is, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm almost 50. I've never had a friend or friends invite me to their proposals, right? Like, I think it's a pretty rare thing. We see some people who go big with their proposals, right? Like, they get, they propose to their girlfriend on the Jumbotron at Yankee Stadium, right? Like, so some people really do get into the whole proposal thing. But a lot of my friends, the ones that I've like I say, I've never been to a friend's proposal. I've been informed after the fact, right? Most people propose in a way that is sort of personal and private. And so I thought, well, that's probably what they would do too. But given the sort of extreme nature of their relationships, that Marjorie and Kasmir have had many near-death experiences. They've bonded with this very small group, their guild. I thought it should be Dragon's Watch, and only Dragon's Watch. But I kept getting pushback. I kept getting, oh, Lord Farron should be here, and like, I was like, no, the guest list for this keeps growing. So I had to give a little ground. I had to compromise a little bit, and I was accepting of them bringing in Logan. Even though Logan is not technically part of Dragon's Watch, Logan was there in the very first moment with Marjorie and Kasmir, and we definitely had a lot of conversations about, well, maybe that implies that they have history, right? Like, they are longtime friends. They have I mean, they do. They're all in Divinity's Reach, right? So, like, I can see a world where, like, Logan is a close personal friend of Marjorie and Kasmir, and that we, as we talk to Logan, he does reveal that, yeah, they've spent many a night.
I didn't realize you were so close.
And we call it out here too. We're like, oh, I didn't know you were that close to them, and to establish that this is why he's here as opposed to other people. But yeah, it was kind of not a fight. I won't say it was a fight, but it was definitely there were definitely some discussions that ruffled some feathers. Mine were ruffled for sure, because I really did want is to be this. I wanted it to be as small as this, and I pretty much got my way. So, sometimes you got to hold your ground.
This isn't going too late. Kree's got me on a short leash these days.
Yeah, so that was fun adding in. There's a nice achievement which I already have, so I don't have access to it now, but you can bring flowers and plant them in the vase. We added some, just a couple little, teases for players who wander around. But yeah, so we also had some interesting discussions around how to dress everybody. Jory and Kasmir, I wanted them to kind of be, dressed casually like everybody else, or most everybody else is. Taimi and Gorik, I kept in their costumes because they're, typical, like, I don't know, guild outfits, just because they both seem like workaholics to me, who would not, like, who would show up to a party in their work clothes. We even talked at some point about whether to put the player in a transform and have them be in formal wear or casual wear. That ended up not being the direction we went, just because, again, our game is Guild Wars 2, but a lot of players nickname us Fashion Wars, and that's that is for a good reason. Like, our players definitely want to see their distinct styles. Their character's look is very important to a lot of players, and it is to me too, right? So like, I think in the end we were like, yeah, we, even though we could put the player in a costume, it would have probably not been ideal for some players. I suppose we could have done a optional where, you know, you could choose to be in casual wear if you wanted to, but it was kind of fun to be able to like make casual costumes for some of our other characters.
Let's enjoy the party. What do you think it's about?
Logan in his motorcycle jacket.
It's been too long.
Oh, I had a lot of fun making some of these composites.
Hope it's okay. I brought along Frostbite.
Frostbite is completely.
This is the same sort of tech we use in our other things, where like I can't interrupt other dialogues that are playing. You know, again, that's deliberate so that players, you know, have one dialogue at a time.
Oh, other than that void invasion, things have been good. We're all enjoying peacetime. I've got a boyfriend.
Really? That's wonderful.
I love that. I've got a boyfriend. I actually was, I think, responsible for that. I can't remember. I know I wrote a version of that line, but I can't remember if that was after we had a meeting about Rox having a boyfriend, or if I just sort of winged it. I think it might have just been for my first draft where I winged it.
Not too busy hobnobbing.
Also, you know, had to make a thing where you could pet Frostbite. We haven't seen Frostbite in a while, so I wanted to give him some love.
It was betting on your adventures that brought about my good fortunes. And also, I really do like you all.
The feeling is mutual. Since you're the last person to arrive, we can get started here any minute.
Yeah, so I also put in a thing where if you don't want to mingle with everybody, you don't have to. All of that's optional dialogue. Marjorie does have a mingle line as well.
Are you also bad with parties? I'm sticking by Kaz all night. Go find your own partner.
The show will get started soon. Go mingle.
We did have initially we had a more engaged conversation with Marjorie, but it was kind of causing some headaches. So
Commander,
we ended up just
you
giving
don't
her
have
a
any
very
application
brief
that
exchange.
requires my particular skill set, do you?
I love seeing Ritlock with his
Political life, not all it's cracked up to be.
hoodie.
Or exactly
it's
what
it's pretty
cracked
badass.
to be.
You get to see his
Slow,
guns for a
two-faced,
change.
Boring as all hell. Creed's in her element. She was born to do it. But me? Not so much.
Couldn't you just resign?
With no reason? Creed have my hide. Nope. Afraid I'll need a real good excuse to get out of this one. So, if you ever have one, think of your old friend Ridlock.
Good old Canuck.
Well, if it isn't our local millionaire. Or is it billionaire now?
You flatter me, Commander. But yes, my club is a smashing success. I've already delegated its day-to-day operations, and it's time for me to move on to my next venture.
Which is?
Not ready for the big reveal yet. But when the time is right, you'll be the first to know.
He's gonna open a chain of fast food restaurants. I'm betting.
Bram.
I really enjoyed making Bram's composite, although this is actually Connor Fallon's choice. I had him maintain some of his like bare-chestedness, but yeah, I think we probably were going too far in that direction. I figured he must, you know, have decided that we should have him dress a little more appropriately for an event like this. A note about Bram's beard. When I heard we should, you know, when I heard the suggestion that we should give Bram a beard, show that he's kind of growing up a little bit, right? It was like, yeah, that's cool. But I tried all the beards that we have, and they all looked just, I don't know. In my view, they were just like all really not working for me. But I was like, you know what? But that kind of works, right? Like Bram, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but like the first beard I grew was terrible. I mean, nobody grows a good beard the first time, right? Like that's just so. I went out of my way to try to give him the worst beard that I could. In my view, what I thought would be the worst beard. I mean, I don't even know how that works, this beard, right? Like yeah. I mean, I think this beard is really supposed to be paired with, you know, a hairstyle that goes down so the bangs kind of connect, and this doesn't. But I was like, oh my God, that is so perfect. It's so perfect for a guy trying to grow his first beard that it should look a hot mess. Funny enough, though, I got nothing but positive compliments. I think there was even a Reddit thread after we shipped where somebody was like, oh my gosh, Bram is such a beefcake with the beard. I'm like, well, clearly I don't know what a good beard looks like or a bad beard looks like, because I thought I was giving him a terrible beard, and apparently everybody liked it. All right, so we're here for the big moment. Before we get started on this, I will want to talk, because then I'm just gonna let it play and let y'all see it, because I think it's worthwhile. So again, we had, I mean, the whole reason for me sort of sparking the idea that we needed this instance, this other epilogue, was so that we could have this moment between Marjorie and Kasmir. It's an important character development moment for them. You know, we wanted them to have something in their relationship. It felt like the right time, you know, like part of the reason why it hadn't happened sooner is because it never really felt quite right. Like there were a couple moments that would have been okay, but you know, like this is now very much like the perfect moment for them. You know, the dragon cycle's over. They have time to focus on themselves and each other. They have been through hell together and come out the other side, and they've survived. You know, so it's like there's just so many reasons why this made sense to do here and now. And when I put this in, though, I was fully anticipating that it would just go in and we would do dialogue, and that would be it. Like I said, there were some people who wanted this moment to be bigger. There were some who thought we couldn't pull it off, and I was pretty confident that we could. So I wanted to stick with it, and so we had a lot of follow-up conversations after our stakeholders got a look at this, and they said, "Yeah, let's do it, but you know, how are we going to do it? Like, what size do we want to do this?" There was talk about having the cinematics team do this as a cinematic. I kind of pushed back on that because I didn't want it to be a cinematic. In part because I was afraid that it would quickly grow in scope to make it into a cinematic, and that would actually potentially lead to it getting cut, right? Like, because that's always the fear, right? Like when you do add something extra, if you overscope that, it's very easy for that to then become too big to deliver on, and so it's very easy to also say, well, it was a great idea, but let's not do it, right? Like, so I was trying to keep scope manageable on this so that we wouldn't have to cut it. I didn't want to have to like put this on the shelf again and say, well, I don't know, right? Like maybe we can't do this. But after talking through it with folks on the cinematics team, we ended up with a compromise, which I was really happy that we did, because it turned out way better than I actually anticipated that it would, which was they said, why don't we at the very least give you custom animations for the end of this? And even that made me hesitate a little bit, just because whenever you do custom animations, it's tricky. You have to do a whole raft of different things. And the way that this works is, you know, when we have characters in the world, they're in their idle pose, which you can see here. It's just them, you know, moving slightly so that they don't look like they're static and dead, and they're just you know, really basic body and head movements, and they blink their eyes, and you know, so it's just basic, you know, idle animation pose. Breaking into that, and starting a new animation, and then because of the way that this so they got the storyboards for how they wanted it to lay out, and they were lovely, but again I was like, I don't know how we do this, because you're gonna have like animations that then go into emotes, which then goes back into animations, which then goes into emotes, and or it's all emotes, and then there's hitching, and there's all kinds of craziness, because again our animation system was built for combat. It was not built to support moments like this, and so we have to get kind of tricky with this stuff as designers. So I was a little bit hesitant, only because I wasn't sure that it was going to really get done the way that we needed it to get done. To my surprise, we ended up making it, and I ended up doing exactly what I said at the beginning, where I fire up a skill. The skill has them turn and hold each other's hands. Then that moves immediately into an emote where they're holding hands. And then, when it goes to the kiss moment, that's when we fire another skill. The skill causes them to kiss. They pull apart, and then they go into an emote where they're each holding each other's hand. And then that's an emote, and that loops for forever until it gets interrupted with another skill, and that skill has Kasmir raise her hand, and then I fire another skill that causes Jory to raise her hand, and then both of them go back into loops of emotes where they're holding, and it's crazy, right? Like, it's, by all rights, that shouldn't work, but it does in the end, if you do it just right. And so it took some finagling to get the timings right, and you do have to like measure every millisecond, and make sure that you're firing the stuff off, boom, 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 and timing everything out. It's a little bit heavy on the hand scripting, but for a moment like this, I was like, I don't care, like, as long as we can get it in and get it good. And I will tell you, like, for a game that does not have character collision, like these two characters have no idea that the other exists, really, so they can't collide, right? Like, all of this is hand scripted and hand placed. They're standing in exactly the spot that they need to stand in, because that's where the animators made them, and so like, and I even had to do like, I got the distance in Maya for how far apart they were, and then I had to convert that in our math system, in the game's engine system, to like, okay, spawn Kasmir, and then take that measurement and offset Marjorie by this many units in the x-axis or y-axis, and this, and so it was a lot of work, but it was, again, so worth it. So anyway, that's pretty much it. That's, I think, what else is there? I don't think there's anything. I did start to talk about whether or not we wanted to have Kaz and Jory in casual wear, or they might actually, I wanted them in formal wear. In the end, it was decided that we were okay with them also being in their quote-unquote work clothes, even though I was a little disconcerted by the fact that, I don't know if you'd wear skulls to, your proposal. I'm not sure that's totally appropriate, but I don't know. Like, in the end, it's like, this is who they are. This is how people recognize these characters. So I think it was probably more important for that than the fact that, Jory, I mean, she is a necromancer, so it makes sense. But again, like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to propose. I'm probably not going to have skulls anywhere near my girlfriend. Just saying. So yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That's all I think I have to say on this instance before we get the proposal going. And I'm gonna go into first person so we can enjoy the look at this wonderful, awesome animation. I have to give credit where it's due too. Alex Garcia, Dahi Im, Chelsea Shooter. Oh my gosh, I don't remember. There was the cinematics animation team just nailed these custom animations. So I apologize if I missed any names specifically called out there, but they all did an amazing job of delivering each of these animations to me, giving me the timings, giving me the, so I mean, it wouldn't have been possible without the work of everybody involved. So it's not just me. But yeah, so let's go ahead and watch this.
Okay, everyone's here. Well, friends, you're probably wondering why we asked you here today.
So much has happened in the last few years. There hasn't been much to count on.
But Jory and I realized that through all that, there's one thing that's always been true.
Something to look forward to at the end of every long battle.
A face like a candle when the whole world seemed dark. Jory, you've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. This life we live has taken us everywhere. But as long as I wake up and see your face next to mine, I'm home. And that's why I'm asking you here, in front of all our friends, to marry me.
Kaz, a life without you is no life for me. You stood by me through everything. Pulled me back from the brink more times than I want to remember. So that's why I'm asking. Will you marry me? Yes.
I'm so happy.
You two deserve this so
Couldn't
much.
happen to a better couple.
It's about damn time.
I still get misty. I've watched it 100 times and I still feel this moment.
Doesn't matter. Congratulations.
This calls for a toast to Kaz and Jory.
To new beginnings with old friends.
There may be no more need for Dragon's Watch. There will always be a guild.
To Dragon's Watch.
To Dragon's Watch.
The Dragon's Watch.
To Dragon's Watch.
I had to turn and face my character at that moment because that was another thing that I did not mention, is trying to get that champagne flute in the player's hand. My God. Yeah, there are some things our game does well, and there are some things it does not. That took some doing. I ended up, like, we had the champagne flute. That wasn't the problem. The problem was we have that that emote where they do the thing and then they kind of drink, but like, as you see, she basically just jams the whole glass in her face, and of course we have no liquid physics or anything like that, so we can't really have it look like she's pouring the glass in her mouth. Yeah, I mean, that involves having to do things like I had to take the champagne flute, turn it into a bundle so that the player could hold it. And one-handed bundles are kind of tricky, and then I had to offset it so that it wasn't, because when I first just made it as a default bundle, it was sort of like hovering up here, and so like there it was even worse, where it would just like go right in her face and like clip out the back of her head, and oh my God, trying to get that right. Yeah, so it was amusing. Anyway, yeah, I apologize for, I don't know, I'm not gonna apologize for being emotional. I think that is one of those moments that I hope will live as part of our game's DNA for a while, right? To have two characters, not just two characters, but two characters who are, queer, to have them make that kind of commitment in our game, to have those kinds of relationships in our game is one thing, but to have them be mature, written in a way that I think honors those kinds of relationships. I don't know. I'm super proud that we have that in the game. I'm super proud that we did this. I am super excited to see where that goes next. Again, I don't have any details on that, so I'm just as much looking forward to that as you all are, I hope. But that is it for my contributions to End of Dragons. So that will conclude the Design Deconstructed series for this expansion. As mentioned in my last episode, I will probably be doing one or maybe more, depending on what I remember of Season 1 content for some of the Season 1 revival stuff. The Molten Dungeon is one that I definitely did a fair amount of work on back in 2013. It was, right? So yeah, again, that was almost 10 years ago, so I don't know if I'll remember a whole lot, but it'll be fun nonetheless to go through it, and I'll give my commentary on that. So look for that in a week or two. I may do that after I move. I'm in the process of getting a new place to live. I'm moving in with my girlfriend, so that's great news. But yeah, it means that I may have to put this series on hold until I move, and maybe you'll get to see my new place in the next video. Hello. Yeah, so that is it. I want to just say thank you to everybody who has been watching these. I've really enjoyed getting back into this series and talking about my work on End of Dragons. I am considering whether to do this more besides just the content that I build for Guild Wars 2, but maybe get into doing some other games and taking a look at how other games do things really well, and call out things that I'm especially fond of in the games that I enjoy. But we'll see. That is a larger project that I might want to consider doing slightly differently, because it's not things that I necessarily have inside information on that I can chime in on, but it's things that hopefully I have enough things to say that will be interesting to you all to make those worthwhile. Anyway, I will stop rambling now. Again, thank you so much for participating with me, watching these Design Deconstructed episodes with me. I really had a lot of fun working on them, and I hope to see you all again soon, either in-game or in my next videos. Okay? And I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.